If you've ever wondered who you can really trust, the answer often lies in the quiet moments no one else notices. In today's world, words are everywhere. Tweets, texts, polished presentations. People know how to sound kind, how to say the right things, how to perform. But behind every smile, behind every carefully chosen word, there's often a hidden truth. So how do we cut through the noise and see people for who they really are? The answer isn't as complicated as you might think. You don't need to study psychology or read minds. Sometimes it's as simple as observing what people do when they have nothing to gain, when there's no applause, when no one is watching. See, in the philosophy of Stoicism, character isn't revealed in grand moments or under a spotlight. It shows up in the shadows, in those ordinary, easily overlooked situations that quietly reflect who someone truly is. And if you know what to look for, you can start to understand others on a much deeper level, whether it's a coworker, a partner, or even yourself. In this video, we'll explore 4 simple but profound principles, 4 lenses that can help you read between the lines of someone's behavior. These aren't theories. They're grounded in the raw, everyday experiences we all go through. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Let's begin with this. Have you ever noticed how some people make promises so easily, but rarely follow through? They say, "I'll be there," or "You can count on me." But when it matters, they vanish. Maybe it's a friend who said they'd help you move, but canceled the night before. Or a manager who promised to stand up for the team, but went silent when things got tough. We often shrug these moments off, but they're not small. The way someone handles a promise, especially when it's inconvenient, says a lot about who they are. Now contrast that with someone like my old neighbor, Frank. He wasn't flashy, never made big declarations. But if he said he'd help you shovel your driveway at 7 a.m., he'd be there, every time, coffee in hand. Quiet, reliable, trustworthy. Frank didn't need an audience to do the right thing, and that made all the difference. Then there's how someone treats people who can't do anything for them in return. The barista, the janitor, the delivery driver. When there's no benefit to being kind, no status to be gained, do they still show respect? Do they still say thank you? There's something deeply revealing in how people treat those with no power over them. It's where empathy either shows up or disappears. You can tell a lot about someone by the way they respond to the word no. Do they respect your boundaries? Or do they push, guilt trip, manipulate? I once had a colleague, let's call him Eric, who acted like a friend until I declined a favor. He turned cold instantly. His charm was never about connection. It was control, and saying no revealed that truth faster than any long conversation ever could. Finally, how do people handle their own mistakes? Everyone slips up, but the test is in the aftermath. Do they own it? Do they apologize? Or do they deny, deflect, and blame? Accountability is a quiet form of power, and those who embrace it without excuses are rare and precious. You see, it's not the big speeches or dramatic gestures that define someone's character. It's how they act when no one's watching. It's whether they're kind to someone who can't help them, whether they show up when it's hard, whether they keep their word even when it's inconvenient, whether they can hear no and still treat you with dignity, whether they admit they're wrong and try to make it right. These little things, they speak louder than any performance ever could. So next time you wonder who someone really is, pause. Don't just listen to what they say. Watch what they do. That's where the truth lives. And maybe, just maybe, in observing them, you'll start to see yourself more clearly too. Principle 1. How someone keeps their promises. When no one's watching, there's something quietly revealing about the way a person handles their promises, especially when no one's watching, no one's reminding, and no one would even notice if they simply walked away. In a world where words are often thrown around like confetti, pretty, temporary, and weightless, it's easy to forget that every promise is actually a thread of trust. Whether it's "I'll be there," "I've got your back," or "I'll take care of it," a promise isn't just about logistics. It's about integrity. It's a subtle but powerful way of saying, "You matter enough for me to show up." But not everyone sees it that way. Many people have grown so used to overpromising that they don't even realize they're breaking anything when they don't follow through. They say yes out of politeness. They commit without thinking. And when life inevitably gets in the way, they let those promises slip through the cracks, without explanation, without apology, without accountability. They assume it's no big deal. But the truth is it is, because over time, broken promises, especially the small ones, start to leave a trace, a sense of doubt, a hesitation, and slowly, whether we admit it or not, our trust in that person begins to erode. Now contrast that with someone who follows through quietly, even when no one's looking. Someone who shows up on time, does what they said they would, and never needs to be reminded. Their word holds weight not because it's loud, but because it's consistent. And that consistency builds something deeper than convenience. It builds trust. The Stoics had a deep respect for the connection between words and actions. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." To them, character was not measured by what you claimed, but by what you quietly honored. But here's where it gets even more personal. It's not just about the promises we make to others. It's about the ones we make to ourselves. How often do we whisper things like, "I'm going to start waking up early," or "I'll take care of myself better this time," or "I'm finally going to follow through on that dream," and then quietly walk away when no one's watching? Not out of malice, just out of habit, just because it's easier. And slowly we teach ourselves not to believe our own words. That's the danger. Not just that others lose trust in us, but that we lose trust in ourselves. And yet there's hope in that awareness, because every small promise you keep, especially the quiet ones, rebuilds something. A sense of steadiness, a sense of self-respect. You begin to trust yourself again. And from that place, your word becomes something powerful, not performative, not loud, just steady, reliable, real. So today, if there's a promise you've made to someone else or to yourself that's gone unspoken for a while, maybe it's time to quietly pick it back up. Not because someone's asking, but because that's who you are, or at least who you're becoming. Because in the end, it's not about being perfect. It's about being present, being someone whose words don't just sound good, but mean something. And that begins when you honor your word, even when no one else is keeping track. Principle 2, how someone treats those who have nothing to offer. If you really want to understand someone's character, don't look at how they treat their boss. Watch how they treat the person they think doesn't matter. It's easy to be nice to those who can give us something, to be charming with a client, respectful with a manager, or warm with someone we admire. But what about the janitor, the cashier, the food delivery driver on a rainy evening? What about the elderly man trying to cross the street slowly, holding up traffic. These are the moments that expose who we really are. Not because anyone is watching, not because there's anything to gain, but precisely because there isn't. I remember a moment at a busy airport. I was waiting in line at a coffee stand behind a man in a suit, clearly in a rush. The young woman behind the counter accidentally mixed up his order. It was a small mistake, easy to fix. But the man exploded. He sighed loudly, rolled his eyes, and muttered something under his breath about incompetence. He snatched the corrected drink without a thank you and stormed off. The entire line went quiet. You could feel the shift in the air. Right after him was a college-age girl. Same mistake, wrong drink. But she just smiled, apologized for being part of the rush, and told the barista, "You're doing great. Hope your shift ends soon." That moment stayed with me far longer than the man's expensive watch or polished shoes. The Stoics would call this virtue in the quiet. Marcus Aurelius believed that true character wasn't something to be performed for others. It was something cultivated in silence. It showed up in how we act when no one is keeping score, and especially in how we treat those who hold no power over us. I think of my former neighbor, Mr. Beck. He was in his late 70s, walked with a cane, and kept to himself. Most people passed him by without a word, but one young man, David, who lived down the street, always stopped to talk, helped carry groceries, shoveled the sidewalk in winter without ever being asked. He never posted about it, never mentioned it. He just did it, quietly, repeatedly, because to him, kindness wasn't a transaction, it was a principle. On the other hand, I've met people who are perfectly respectful in meetings, generous with peers, but completely dismissive to the waiter who serves their table, or impatient with the Uber driver who misses a turn. It's subtle, but telling, because how you treat those who can't promote you, flatter you, or benefit you is how you reveal your foundation. Psychologists say we're most ourselves when we believe no one important is watching. That's when the mask slips. The kindness that costs nothing, that's the kind that counts the most. So ask yourself, how do you treat the people who can't offer you anything in return? Do you greet the janitor at work? Do you thank the bus driver? Do you hold the door open when no one notices? These aren't small gestures. They're quiet declarations of your values. Because in the end, character isn't about how we act on stage. It's about how we carry ourselves in the background. And the more we pay attention to those moments, the more we begin to understand not just others, but also ourselves. The next time you want to see someone's truth, don't wait for a crisis. Watch what they do in the quiet. When kindness is optional, when patience has no reward, that's when the real story begins. Principle 3, how someone reacts when told no. One of the most honest tests of a person's character is how they respond to a simple word, no. We don't often think of rejection as revealing, but it is. When someone hears no to a request, a favor, or even a boundary, their response can quietly expose their emotional maturity or lack of it. Because let's be honest, it's easy to be composed when everything goes our way. But what about when we don't get what we want? That's when the mask slips. Years ago, I had a colleague named Marin, outgoing, charismatic, always the first to organize team lunches and birthday gifts. Everyone liked her, but I remember the day I politely declined an invitation to her weekend trip. I simply needed rest after a long month. Her reaction surprised me. It started with guilt tripping. "Come on, you never do anything fun." Then it turned cold. She stopped talking to me for days. It wasn't the rejection that hurt. It was the way she made it feel like I had wronged her, just for saying no. And I've seen this pattern again and again. When someone hears no and responds with anger, manipulation, or passive aggression, it often signals something deeper, an unmet need for control. Sometimes it's about ego, feeling entitled to a yes. Sometimes it's about insecurity, taking rejection as a personal attack rather than a healthy boundary. In contrast, emotional maturity looks very different. A grounded person hears no and doesn't take it as a threat. They don't need to push back, defend their worth, or make you feel guilty. They can simply say, I understand, and mean it. That kind of grace is rare, but when you see it, you remember it. I once worked with a client named Andre, calm, thoughtful, quietly confident. We were in negotiations over a creative project, and I had to turn down one of his requests. It wasn't personal, just didn't fit our timeline. I braced myself for pushback. Instead, he nodded and said, "Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate the clarity. No drama, no resentment, just presence." And in that moment, he earned more trust than any yes could have. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about indifference to externals. Epictetus taught that our power lies in how we respond, not in how things go. Rejection is just a circumstance, but our reaction, that's where our freedom lives. Rejection, after all, isn't always about us. Sometimes people are overwhelmed. Sometimes they're not ready. Sometimes they just have different needs. And yet, how often do we personalize it? Turn it into a story of being unloved, unappreciated, or disrespected. But what if we didn't? What if we saw a no not as a threat, but as information, as someone else choosing what's right for them, not wrong for us? That shift in thinking changes everything. Because the ability to hear no without losing your center is a form of strength. It means you are not depending on external validation to stay steady. It means you can allow others their freedom without needing to control the outcome. And that's a rare kind of power, the kind you don't have to announce. So the next time someone tells you no, watch what happens inside. Do you feel rejected or just redirected? Do you reach for control or do you return to yourself? How someone responds to no is one of the most subtle and profound indicators of their inner world. It reveals whether they're grounded in ego or in truth. Because in the end, your reaction to rejection says more about you than the rejection itself. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away with peace. Principle 4, how someone handles their own mistakes. You can't fully know someone's character until you've seen how they handle being wrong. It's easy to look composed when we're right, when we're praised, or when we're in control. But what about when we mess up, when the mistake is ours undeniably and publicly? That's when something deeper gets revealed, not just about what we did, but about who we are. Everyone makes mistakes. It's part of being human. But not everyone takes responsibility for them. Some people deflect, blame others, or pretend nothing happened. Others, those with quiet strength, choose to own it, not for show, not because they have to, but because it's the right thing to do. I once worked on a small volunteer team for a community project. One of our members, Clara, was responsible for organizing a local event. Due to a scheduling error on her part, we lost access to the venue just 2 days before. It was frustrating, months of preparation, gone in a moment. The group expected finger-pointing or excuses, but Clara surprised us. She stood in front of everyone and said, "This one's on me. I overlooked the final confirmation. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." And she did. She found a new space, coordinated logistics, and stayed late cleaning up afterward. No one asked her to. She just chose to be accountable. That moment stayed with me, not because she made a mistake, but because of how she responded to it. Her integrity didn't break under pressure. It got stronger. Compare that to another situation I witnessed a few years earlier. A coworker named Nick botched a presentation that lost a client. Instead of owning it, he blamed outdated data from another team. Later, we found out he'd ignored 2 reminders to double-check the numbers. When confronted, he just shrugged and said, "It's not like I was the only one working on this." That sentence told us everything. Here's the thing, mistakes don't define your worth, but how you respond to them reveals your values. Owning up is never easy. It requires humility, courage, and emotional maturity. But it also builds trust, because people can feel when you're being real. No one expects perfection, but they do hope for honesty. The Stoics were clear about this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily not to waste time debating what a good person should be, but to be one. Epictetus taught that while we can't control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. That includes how we respond to our own failures. Taking responsibility isn't about beating yourself up. It's about aligning your actions with your values, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes that means saying, "I was wrong." Sometimes it means saying, "I'm sorry." Sometimes it means asking, "How can I make this right?" And sometimes it means learning in silence, without fanfare, simply so that the same mistake doesn't happen again. We live in a world where saving face often feels more important than facing the truth. But lasting trust isn't built on image, it's built on integrity. And integrity shows up most clearly when things go wrong. So the next time you slip, and you will because we all do, pause. Breathe and ask yourself, what would the person I want to be do right now? Because every mistake is a doorway, not just to regret, but to growth, to clarity, to rebuilding yourself stronger and more grounded than before. In the end, we're not remembered for being flawless. We're remembered for how we handled the hard moments. And nothing speaks louder than someone who chooses truth over ego, especially when it would have been easier to hide. You don't have to wait for someone to do something grand to know who they really are. The truth of a person often reveals itself in quiet, easily overlooked moments. When they're told no, when no one's watching, when there's nothing to gain, and when keeping their word would cost them just a little more than it's worth. These aren't dramatic scenes. They're subtle, but they matter. And the more you pay attention to them, the more they start to form a pattern, a reflection of who someone truly is. I've learned over the years that character isn't defined by what someone says when things are going well. It's defined by how they behave when no one's clapping, when their ego is bruised, or when they're offered nothing in return. The person who quietly apologizes after making a mistake, even though it would have been easier to ignore it, that's someone who can be trusted. The person who still treats others with kindness when there's nothing in it for them, that's someone who understands respect. The person who accepts a boundary without pushing back or pouting, that's someone who has done the work to grow. And the person who follows through on a promise, even when it's inconvenient, well, that's someone whose word carries weight. These are the micro moments that often go unnoticed. But if you want to see someone clearly, don't wait for the spotlight. Watch them in the quiet. That's where their truth lives. And perhaps more importantly, turn that lens inward, because the same applies to us. Are we kind when no one notices? Do we we keep our word when no one's keeping score? Do we handle rejection with maturity? Do we own our mistakes without excuses? Each of these questions is a mirror, not a judgment, but an invitation, a quiet call to live with a little more intention, a little more integrity, and a little more presence. The Stoics didn't believe in waiting for the perfect moment to be virtuous. They believed in practicing it now in every moment, no matter how small. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That kind of clarity doesn't come from theory, it comes from practice, from paying attention, from choosing again and again to live by principle, not convenience. And the good news is we get those chances every single day. Every time you're tired, but choose patience. Every time you're disappointed, but respond with grace. Every time you could ignore, deflect, or justify, but instead you step up. Those are the moments that shape who you are becoming. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be loud. You just need to be consistent, present, willing to grow. Because the smallest choices made consistently become the foundation of the person you carry through the world. And through those choices, you don't just see others more clearly, you begin to understand yourself in ways you never did before. So the next time you're tempted to overlook a tiny detail in someone's behavior or your own pause, that small gesture might be saying more than you think. And if this message resonated with you, I invite you to stay connected. Like this video, share it with someone who values quiet integrity, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future insights on living with clarity, presence, and purpose. We're building something honest here, one small, meaningful step at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.